Hello there, and welcome to a very special episode of the Fiction Hack Podcast. My name is Colin Monroe. I'm not joined this week by Ross Lawhead, but I do have two very special guests. They're both writers. One of them is called F.T. Kulpa, and the other one is Wendell Mitchell Snow, also known as Tony and Sam. Say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
So, it's NaNoWrimo this month, and we're trying to put out some special content for that reason. And that is why I'm joined by these two writers. They are old friends of mine, and they're the ones who sort of the first people to tell me about NaNoWrimo was Tony, and although I've never done it, Tony and Sam have done, and that we're going to share their experiences, I guess. So, Tony, why don't you start? Maybe, how did you first hear about it? Because I think you're the one who introduced Sam. So,
Yeah. Oh, yes. I guess I am the oldest Rimo in the group. So I actually heard it from a student of mine. I heard about it from a grade 7 student who was a passionate writer, even at that age, and mentioned it to me. I thought it was a really cool idea. I'd been writing for several years at that point, but had a really hard time finishing anything. And I thought it would be a good way of motivating myself. So I signed up. That was in 2009.
okay, so that's quite a while before we even met.
Yes.
And then you got Sam into it when we met over in South America,
Yes.
right?
Yes. That is correct.
So, Sam, do you want to? What was your experience of writing before you started NaNoWrimo, Sam?
Right, so I had never written anything except for school assignments before I met Tony. And as I recall, we were both teaching at the same school, and I walked in his classroom one day after school, and he was writing in his program. He has a program called Scrivener that he uses to keep track of things, and it looks like a corkboard. And I said, "Oh, what is that? That looks so cool." And he was like, "Oh, yes, I'm writing." And I was like, "Oh, this guy's weird." And this wasn't even really before we knew each other very well. But then we got to know each other a little bit better, and I think we were out for coffee one day, and he told me about NaNoWrimo, and he said, "Sam, you should write. You have so many good ideas." And I said, "That's ridiculous. I'm never going to do that. You're stupid." And then I did it. And it was amazing. Like, I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and so I've done it every year since then.
There were actually several different stages of him saying, "You're stupid, I'm never going to do that." He went through the ha 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 what funny jokes you tell stage, and then he went through the no, but that's totally impossible. It's ridiculous. It just couldn't happen.
When will I have the time?
Yeah, there was definitely that stage, and then it was that sounds really cool, and I do have this really good idea, but I just would never be able to get down to it. And then finally, you I think it was of course October, that you decided, okay, I'm just going to spend this month planning and fleshing out my idea, and then sure, let's give it a try and see how it goes.
And that was the first time, and now since then, Sam, you've done it how many projects have you actually finished off?
Let's
starting
see.
them for NaNoWrimo?
Well, I really liked what I did the first year, and I self-published that. Since then, I've written 3 other things, but none of them, they were all thoroughly enjoyable to write, but not good enough, I thought, to be publishable. So, but the one that I'm working on now, I think, has good potential, and I might add that to my collection.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Tony? How many have you done?
Let's see. Last year I did not do it at all. Other than that, I've done it pretty much every year. So
you didn't do it last year at all?
No, not at all. I mean, I signed up for it, but I didn't really write much.
How did I miss that?
One scene, yeah. That was the only year that I have really not had any success with it at all since then. So I guess Since this is the 10th year, I must have 10 or 9, I suppose, that I've written.
Cool.
Although
And this
I
year,
guess you did one that was part 1, part 2, and part 3.
Yes, so four of those years in a row were the same. The same project, but each one was a new part. It could certainly be considered a new novel. Each year, I had a beginning, a middle, and end, a plot structure. So you could say I wrote a 4-part series over the course of 4 years.
Yeah.
Or 1 250,000 word behemoth.
Yeah.
yeah. So this year, we're currently recording this on the 12th, I think.
Yes.
The 12th of
It's the
November.
12th right
So
now
what's your word count this month, Tony? So far,
Uh,
are you on pace? Is what I'm saying. I guess that's the important thing.
I didn't get any writing done this weekend, but I think I have 15,000 in the neighborhood of 15,000 words.
We should clarify here for our audience that the goal in NaNoWrimo is to write 50,000 words, which is the length of a kind of the shorter end of the novel spectrum, which breaks down to about 1,667 words a day if you write every day in November.
Right.
So today on the 12th, I'm not even sure what what you should have without opening up the
20,000.
website. 20,000. There you go.
About
Okay.
20,000. So you're a
So-
bit behind pace, but that's okay.
I was on pace on Friday. I did get some writing done after I posted my word count on Friday, so it should be a little bit higher than that. But I was on pace on Friday, but I didn't get anything done over the weekend. So.
Mm-hmm. And Sam, you're sort of participating this year, but you're not actually sort of writing a new project, are you? Or are you?
That's
what are you
right.
up to?
Yes, I decided that dedicating time in November to writing is kind of the goal of NaNoWrimo as a whole. Just kind of getting people to kind of stretch their creative legs. And so I'm taking what I wrote last year, and since I didn't have time to edit it during the year, I'm actually just going back over that and editing it, adding descriptions and dialogue, and kind of solidifying a lot of the details so that I have something that's much more polished to maybe turn in to other people like Tony. I'll send it to Tony to read, and a few of my other friends who are editors to see what they think. So, I mean, some people might call it cheating to work on a project, but I think really NaNoWrimo, the people who sponsor the website, the people who run it, are really just concerned that people are using this dedicated time to be creative in any way that looks like. But I should mention as well that as a middle school teacher, I have proposed the idea to my students, and they have the opportunity this year to earn extra credit. And I try to offer that every year, and often I get not overwhelming responses because it's not required, and I don't teach English. But yeah, kids are interested, and I think that's really great. I think it's a really good thing. And there's a young writers program as well, where the young writers are not
part of NaNoWrimo.
Yeah, part of NaNoWrimo. So it's a separate website, but they reduce the. Actually, I guess you get to set your own goal as the young writer, so you don't have to write 50,000 words as a 12-year-old, but you could if you wanted, which is cool.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm sure there are some that could and would love to.
Yeah.
So what strikes me though, I'm not a writer and I'm not doing NaNoWrimo. I'm just here as the podcast host. Is the whole community side of it? When you imagine a writer or the process of writing, you think of somebody locking themselves away in a room, typing away at their computer on their own as a very solitary thing, which I think is probably one of the things that people struggle with. But NaNoWrimo's kind of that. I think that's kind of the main thing that it fights against is and bringing people together over the internet, but also physically as well. I mean, people are encouraged to have meetups and things like that. Is that right? Have you engaged with that kind of thing?
So when I first started, there were only a couple of people that I knew that were doing it. And in the first year in South America, Sam, did I get you started the first fall that I was that we were at the same school, or was it the next year?
No, I think it was. I think it was that fall.
Okay. So that one year, we were the only two writing, and I think maybe the next year as well, we were the only two writing. But our third year, we managed to get a whole group of people involved, and some of them wound up writing a whole novel. Some of them didn't, but we would have meetings in someone's house once a week, I think, and we had really good discussions, and it was really encouraging, really exciting to hear about different people's stories that they were doing. And maybe I'll let Sam talk more about that. And I'll say that when I moved back to Canada, one of the things I was looking forward to was getting involved in a local NaNoWrimo group. And so I did that. I was living in a large English-speaking city, so I was able to go to a couple of those activities. The first one was at a public library. It was just kind of a meetup, and it was specifically for authors of that were planning on writing fantasy work that year. And there were about 8 people who showed up, and we talked about our writing experience and our novels, and just kind of got hyped. That was a lot of fun. But then I went to a write-in the first day of NaNoWrimo, which was also at the city library, and they had reserved a room, and about 30 people came with laptops or notebooks, or in some cases tablets or something like that, and we all wrote for about 4 hours or so. I'm not exactly sure what it was. It was in the evening, and I didn't get home until late. And it was really interesting. It was really cool. You could.
So what's that like? Because writing is still, you still got to concentrate on what you're doing on your own. It's still solitary in that sense, but you're just doing it together in the same room. Is everyone sitting around in silence, or?
No, definitely not. I mean, it was.
No?
I think there probably was a lot of silence, just because I don't remember that part because I was excitedly writing.
Yeah.
But there was also a lot of non-silence. Someone would groan, and everybody in that area of the room would be like, "You can do it! You can do it! You can do it!" Or someone would throw up their hands in frustration, and people would cheer them on. Someone would laugh out loud, and people would be like, "Tell us, what was the joke you just came up with?" It was really exciting and active and extremely non-solitary. I feel like some of my most exciting times in NaNoWrimo have been not solitary. I know Sam and I have written together. I would come over to his house after school or something like that, and we would both sit there, quietly for the most part, but by no means silent. It didn't feel like being isolated. But this was just the scale of it, and the fact that these were all strangers, and there were people from high school age to senior citizens all excitedly working together. It was really, really interesting. Another dimension, unless you have another question.
Sam, it looks like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost like you are one of the members of the Ink Blots, or what is it that they were called, J.R.R. Tolkien and the Inklings. That's right.
Yeah.
Like maybe you're not writing great stuff. Maybe you're not writing the next Lord of the Rings, but you have people who know your story, or at least the outline of it, and they throw ideas out there, and you're under no obligation to take their advice, but that can spark your imagination to think of a different way to do what you were already thinking of. And the creature that you create ultimately with a group of people, it will be different than one that you would have written by yourself. And it's just fun. You can drink coffee and just kind of when your brain gets fatigued, you can take a break and have someone else to talk to and get excited about what you're writing again when you're writing together in a room with someone. But I was going to talk about the group that we'd had in Paraguay, which was a lot of fun. We didn't actually spend any of our time together writing together. Tony and I did, but the group didn't. We would just go out to a coffee shop, and then NaNoWrimo has these things called pep talks that it sends every week, where a famous author who has done NaNoWrimo will kind of write a little page about their inspiration and what keeps them going, or how they overcame some of their writing blocks, and just encourages writers to just keep going. And so we would read that out loud together as we drank our coffee or what have you. And then afterwards, we would share like where we had gotten in our story, what progress we'd made, or if we hadn't made any progress, we felt comfortable sharing that as well. Because
so it's not a competition, right?
Right, it's not a competition. Yeah. If you get the 50,000 words, you win, and there's a whole bunch of different prizes that the website gives you. I managed to get a hard copy of my first book that I wrote that first year, which is really cool to have in your hand, and I got it for free because of the deals that the website had arranged with publishers. So that was very cool.
Yeah. So. Do you think it's fair to say that perception of a writer, sitting on their own, work of writing being a solitary activity, is actually wrong? Going back to the Inklings, Tony is showing me his copy of Sam's book.
Regnum Stellarum, Wendell Mitchell Snow. It's amazing.
Okay, there'll be time for plugs later. Let me finish what I was saying. So yeah, because we were talking about the Inklings, and they had this community. It wasn't just Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. There were some other people in there as well, and yeah, so they had this community, and they kept each other going and things like that. So they, writing for them. And presumably there's other groups of writers who have done this, who write together, if not, and not write together, but they get together to talk about their writing. So do you think that image of writing being a solitary thing is wrong?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it was wrong, because I think there are as many different types of writers as there are different types of people. And some people probably need peace and quiet. And if their wife came in with a tray of cookies to help them think, then they would chase her out and slam the door and say, "How dare you disturb my creative process?" But then others might need cookies to think, and I guess it's kind of sexist of me to kind of assume that the author is a male. The opposite is also true. The wife might chase the husband out with the tray of cookies.
Okay.
But some people write better in community, some people don't, and some people need a little bit of that, and some people need more of that, I think. So.
But do you think people underestimate the need for feedback, constructive feedback?
Yes, definitely. It's definitely one of the most important aspects of the entire process. What I was going to say, actually, in answer to your question, is that while I agree that, of course, there are people who need more solitude when actually writing, writers are inherently social creatures, not in the sense that, we have amazing social skills, because we don't always, but our ideas come from observations. Writers need to observe people, and I think the best writers are often the best people watchers, the best judges of character in this kind of thing. But to respond to what you were just saying, probably the single greatest influence on the quality of someone's writing is how good they have gotten at editing, revising, changing what they've written based on what they have learned that works and what hasn't. Because even, if you've edited through stories multiple times, it even changes the way you write it the first time. You're going to you're going to incorporate things that you have realized work better. It changes your voice. It creates a more distinct voice. And those kind of things only come by butting up against other writers and hearing them interact with your writing, or by butting up against test readers, people who don't have any interest in writing, and they can't say, "Oh, this is what you did wrong and you need to fix it here." They just say, "This didn't work for me," or "I loved this scene," when you maybe thought it wasn't great. You have to be hearing what other people think about your writing. You have to be hearing what other people think about your writing in order to improve.
Right.
Writers don't tend to like that. but it is absolutely, absolutely essential.
So maybe when people start getting into writing, they think more about the act of sitting down and knocking the words out, when they should be thinking more about setting up their sort of infrastructure for getting that feedback and listening to people's opinion. Is that fair to say?
I think that that's very true. However, getting the words out is also super important. If listening to feedback and learning from readers and other writers is the biggest factor to improve your writing, not sitting there and doing the work and getting your words out is the biggest obstacle to actually writing. Most people never make it through their first novel, and that's what
I would say that. Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say. That's what NaNoWrimo wants. They encourage you to write, even if it's drivel, but to just write it, so that at least when you started NaNoWrimo, you had nothing. But by the time you finish NaNoWrimo, you have something that you can work with.
Yes.
You have something that you can improve, whereas before you had nothing to improve.
So completing NaNoWrimo is really just the beginning.
Oh yes, absolutely.
It
absolutely.
Is.
If you want to be a published author.
Well, regardless, if you just enjoy writing, like the process of NaNoWrimo is the beginning in both ways. You have now accomplished a task that most people, even that try to do so, have not successfully accomplished, and you now know how to do it. It's going to be easier every successive time. But you've also, if you've done NaNoWrimo, you've at least been given the opportunity to plug into a group, because the NaNoWrimo website and the pep talks they send out really push you into joining the forums, joining a local group or society, or even buddying up with friends. A lot of even published authors sign up for NaNoWrimo each year so that they can be buddied by different people, and you can race your favorite author, so to speak. There's a lot of social aspects to it. So yeah, it is the beginning, and NaNoWrimo does a great job of kind of pushing you past that difficult point.
Yeah, great. So what are some of the even with the help of NaNoWrimo and the community, what are some of the problems that you still come up against? And why are you laughing? Are there just too many?
No, it's just there's a lot of good answers to this question, I guess.
Okay.
For me, it's Thanksgiving. Because you have to have. I mean, it's not the same in Canada, obviously, because their Thanksgiving is October. But in America, at least, we have this massive meal that requires family interaction, and it's very difficult sometimes to slip away quietly and go and do your writing for the day when you're supposed to be eating turkey, or perhaps even you can't write because you can't think because you've already eaten so much turkey.
Yeah. But from a writing point of view, though, what are some of the struggles? I mean, not NaNoWrimo specific. What have you struggled with writing your projects?
That's a good question. I guess for me, the big struggle is feeling like my story is good enough to write, and maybe also kind of figuring out the details before I start writing it so I know where I'm going. And some people don't need that to write effectively. Some people can just go by the seat of their pants. Yeah. But what I've found when I've tried to do that is that it doesn't end up being publishable, or it doesn't end up being worth editing.
That's interesting. So just to clarify, you're saying that when you have planned it out in advance, you end up thinking it's not as good?
No, when I do plan it out in advance, it ends up being worth it. Whereas when I just let it flow, the story, I'm not good enough of a storyteller, I guess, to just tell it and let it come to its natural conclusion. I have to know where the story is going before I get there.
Yeah, because that's what one of our recent episodes was about. It's about story structure, and to what extent should writers plan things out in advance. And Ross's take on that was surprising to me. He was saying that, we were specifically talking about act structure and whether you should have like 3 acts or 5 acts, and he was saying, no, you definitely shouldn't. You shouldn't stick to some kind of formula. I guess that's not quite the same as. That doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't plan things out. But tell me a bit more about what you do in preparation for writing or for NaNoWrimo. Like, to what extent do you plan things out?
Tony introduced me to a method called the snowflake method, which has been really very helpful for me. And so in that, you start with your story summarized in just a sentence.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take that sentence and make it a paragraph, adding some detail. And then you take that paragraph and you make it a page, and every time you kind of expand it, you're adding some detail to it. And then you can do the same thing with characters. Like you can say, this character is the father of so-and-so. But then you can...
So you're allowing it to grow organically, but you're still having a kind of bird's eye view on it, so you know how it goes.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
How it's going to go. Yeah.
And so, that allows people, because, to address the issue of planning, I think I agree with Ross, of course, that formulaic writing is something not necessarily to be avoided. It's something that if it works for you, then that's great. But it also has some pitfalls. So I definitely agree with Ross on that. But the issue of planning versus being someone who just kind of does... NaNoWrimo calls this being a pantser. You just write by the seat of your pants. So they have planners and pantsers on NaNoWrimo. Some people work better having a very detailed plan, and some people work better having a more of just an exciting idea and running with it. And the great thing about the snowflake method is it kind of lets you do both, because you're writing and you're exploring, and you never really come up with a concrete set of, like, it's not like an outline where you have to follow this. You've just done a lot of writing, and then when you start writing your novel, you may stick to these ideas, you may change things. It doesn't matter. However, if you do the snowflake method, you'll end up with a page of the description of the entire novel, maybe a page about each of your main characters, a page about certain major turning points, a page about certain important background events, these kind of things. You can then turn that into an outline if you're a planner very easily. It's pretty straightforward to go from there to an outline. For me, I have had very good success with both methods. I have sat down and written a complete outline. I have done the snowflake method and wound up writing about a page summary of every chapter, or in some cases every scene that I'm going to write. And then gone through and written it out and pretty well followed the plan and had some really good success that way. But also, I believe some of my best NaNoWrimo works, at least, have been with no planning whatsoever. I had maybe 2 ideas in my head, and I launched into it.
You just ran with it.
Ran with it. And it went into really interesting places. So I think both can work, and they can even both work for the same person. It really just depends on the idea and what you're in the mood for. That said, if you can do the planning ahead of time, it definitely makes it easier to turn out a quality product in November.
I think as well we should point out that NaNoWrimo encourages you to prepare if that is what you want. Sure. It's not cheating. There is really no cheating in NaNoWrimo. If you want to spend all of October planning it and even have the first chapter written, as long as you don't count that chapter that you wrote in October in November, then they don't care.
Yeah, that's true.
So when you guys start writing, is it... I remember I've like I said, I'm not a writer, but I did try and write a couple of times. In fact, it was you, Tony, that encouraged me as well. So you were an inspiration to many people. And And I remember just even within like one session of getting into it, I went to places that I hadn't even thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
And do you find that happens to you, or have you pretty much? Do you know where you're going, or does the things? How much does the things change as you get into it? Either of you?
Well, certainly.
Well,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say that Tony is a very organized, and I have always been very impressed when he kind of shares a new idea that he has, that he's already got in his head. He's got the backstory. He knows who a lot of the main characters already are and like their motivations. And he hasn't even written a snowflake yet, but he knows. Like, he knows his characters intimately, whereas I feel like
you get to know them.
I get to know them as I write. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Tony is more brainy, and I'm more, I don't know what the
He's
word
one of the
is.
smartest people I know, so yeah.
Papery, maybe?
Papery? Yeah, I guess.
Well, see, that is true, but some of that same process, like in the cases where I know a character so well that I feel like I have conversations with them when I'm walking down the street, that doesn't necessarily mean that happened as a result of planning. For instance, even as I'm writing or working out a story, oftentimes you get to a point where what you have kind of envisioned that character doing doesn't make sense. You know that that's not something that character would do. And sometimes you have to say, okay, well, I have to think about what the character would do, what will make sense. But sometimes it just seems obvious. You know what that character would do because you've come to get to know them over time. So yeah, I think that no matter how much planning you've done, you should always be open to discover new things in your writing, for things to kind of take you in a new place. Now, that said, I think that a distinction between a very experienced author and one who's just getting started is the ability to stay on track. Not in the sense of not allowing yourself to explore new things, but in the sense of not allowing that to veer you off course and waste your time to make the story become more meandering. Obviously, if you're doing that intentionally, it's fine, but sometimes newer authors will tend to write a really, really long side plot that isn't necessarily helping the story be stronger. And if you're a newer writer, I say, yes, I encourage you to do that. Just do it, because you never know. Maybe that crazy side plot will actually become the book. And when you edit it, you're going to take out all the references to the first story. I definitely think that that's true of probably my first ever book. I was writing the history of a tribe, and I fixated on one character, and the book became that character's story. And only the first couple of chapters really deal with his roots. So there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just kind of knowing when it's appropriate and when you have to kind of be more disciplined.
Yeah. Okay. What shall I ask you next?
Well, was there more to that question? Or like you were asking about discovery? Did you have anything more to say about that, Sam?
I have not written as much. I don't have as many years under my belt, and
It's like
so
5 at this point.
yeah. But you started writing in 2009, whereas I feel like I don't know.
So how is it for you then? Like, if you don't, do you feel your story changes? Do you feel you go to places you didn't imagine beforehand while you're writing, or what's it like for you?
That has not happened as much for me. I have planned my stories pretty well. Mm-hmm. I've spent October planning, and I've stuck with them. There's the occasional thing where, like, I didn't expect there to be dialogue in this particular scene. I just kind of expected to go through it and get to the goal. but then a dialogue kind of organically appears as you write it, and you're like, yeah, this is good, and you just go with it, and I think that adds I don't know, authenticity and unexpected turns, and maybe even options later for your characters. To like, since the reader knows that they've had this conversation with X person, then we can bring this person back again, and it won't be strange. So then you can kind of sometimes you can replace minor characters that were just in passing with that character that you randomly had a conversation with earlier, and then you don't have to have as many nothing characters, because you introduced this one earlier. So yeah, I mean, that does occasionally happen, but I've never, like, as Tony was experienced with this story about the tribe, I've never started writing about one character and then ended up writing something completely different. That's never happened to me. I don't know if it might one day, like I said, Tony's written like 10 things and I've written like 3. So yeah.
So do you feel that maybe as you write more, you might get more comfortable with it?
Yeah, maybe.
And allow yourself to kind of not plan so much, and fly by the seat of your pants a little more.
I don't think that's the kind of person that I am. No, absolutely not. I think I'm definitely a planner, and I don't think I would feel confident enough writing going into NaNoWrimo, and I would probably give it up if I didn't have a goal to write towards.
Well, you can still have a goal to write towards. You just don't need to have things so thrashed out in advance.
Well, one thing I'd like to throw in there is that this takes many forms. I think, for instance, I'm thinking of Chalians, Sam, and you had a pretty strict outline that you had to stick to. But sometimes when you're writing, the events...
That's one of Sam's projects, right? Chalians?
Yes. It was, I think it was your second NaNoWrimo?
It was my third, actually.
Was it the third? No, I'm sorry, not Chalians. The one before that.
Bez's story.
Yes. What was it? What's the title again?
Defiance.
Defiance. That's right, Defiance. So you had a very strict outline that you kind of had to stick to for that in order for the story to work. But I feel that your characters grew over time. You had a pretty good idea of what you wanted to do with your characters, but the characters' interactions with each other changed quite a bit. For instance, Baz with the thralls, these sort of things kind of evolved. Now, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but in general, I would say that this is one of the ways that people discover things about their writing as they do, is not necessarily events or settings, or are not necessarily plot. The plot doesn't kind of run away on you. Characters do. You get to know your character, or a city, a locale, a relationship, a plot point, a piece of technology, and you start expanding on that as you become more interested in it as you get deeper into your world.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think, like, as you write setting, for example, you can, as you write the words, you can picture it in your head, and then you know whether they need to turn right or left in the next scene because you've imagined it. Whereas before it was just the town. And so you kind of have a generic picture in your head of a town. But then there's a bakery beside the hotel.
Yeah.
And there's a tavern further up the street.
And this is guy who hangs out outside the town.
Right, or even like this is in the middle of it, and you're going to have to walk for miles to get out. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing that I think is really important is just kind of learning whether you're, in NaNoWrimo terms, a planner or a pantser. I did explore with some stories without planning as much, and I had some success. I definitely don't think I'm as successful, but I think those stories have a different quality to them. Whereas Sam feels pretty sure that he would not enjoy the process of trying to write without a detailed plan. And so that's great. You just need to know that about yourself. and play to your strengths.
Yeah.
It
So
is
self-awareness
true
is really
that when I
important.
started writing Challions, which is one of the projects that Tony mentioned, I just wanted to write a sci-fi epic. And I didn't want any constraints. I didn't want it to need to go to a certain place. I just wanted something that I could, bring explosions and spaceships and laser guns into and just have fun with it. And then once I kind of had that goal, then the story, I kind of felt that the story was irrelevant. I just wanted to have fun and write it. And in the end, the plot was so convoluted for me that it didn't make sense anymore. And so it was a lot of fun and definitely worth writing that. But in the end, I didn't have a piece of writing that I felt had enough direction to eventually become a novel.
Right.
Or if it was going to become a novel, I was going to have to rewrite probably about a good half of it. So,
but then don't you feel like having too much of a plan then restricts you? Like we were saying, earlier on about the town and how you learned that then the town has a tavern and it's next to a bakery, and then there's a guy who hangs out there. Don't you feel that like sticking too much to your plan stops you from then exploring those little characters who are possibly by the by, just part of the scenery, but could end up becoming something more significant, and that could add a lot of depth to the project overall?
In my opinion, that is for the editing stage. But for other people, they like to do that, and I think even NaNoWrimo has what are they called, Tony? Where it's like a challenge. And they say,
yes, they have the writing prompts and stuff like that. Yeah,
so if you get stuck,
it's like here, kill off one of your characters, or have your character run into a homeless person, or have your character, two of your characters, decide to get married for nefarious purposes or whatever. That's true. You can throw these things in, and I think that as you're writing, if you get really excited about a side character and you write a lot about them, and you decide that it either doesn't fit or you want to expand on that character, you can do it in the editing process. So I think that what you're saying, I don't think that it restricts you, because for one, no matter how well you know your imaginary town, you don't know every building. You don't know every single person that lives in that town. You have huge amounts of opportunities to still expand and explore into unknown territory. And if you write that character with that hangs out at the tavern that tells bad jokes, and you come back to this later and you want to do something different with that character, it can even become a plot point. Like the character is now different. What happened? There's another guy there instead, or his mannerisms are different, and it can be a clue to some larger element. I think there's a lot of flexibility even within a plan. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that most of the time you can break your plan. You have the power.
Yeah.
Yes, you are God.
Yeah, I mean, God is the author of creation. You are the author of the creation you are creating.
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
authoring.
Which I think is one of the reasons why I was very excited to do this sci-fi epic. Because if in a fantasy universe you can use magic and stuff like that, and in a science fiction universe you can use technology to make anything that you want happen. Like, you just have to imagine the invention that would give you the power to do this thing, and then that can be an integral part of your story.
Yeah.
And I suppose you can do the same thing in just like fiction stories that are set in modern times. And a lot of people enjoy reading those types of things, and a lot of people enjoy writing those types of things. But for me, that's why I read science fiction, and that's why I read fantasy, and that's why I write those things as well, so that I have the power to push the limits, any of the limits that I want to. with just the tip of my pen.
That is very nicely put, Sam. I think we are running out of time now, but we've still got obviously a lot of stuff to talk about. So I think maybe we'll try and do a part 2 sometime, a little bit later into the process.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, I think we should let people get back to their writing. But before we do, Sam, do you want to tell anyone some of your projects are available if people wanted to buy them and check your work out?
I do have a book that I've published on Amazon. It's an ebook, and I think I've sold about 6 copies, which is great. It's called Regnum Stellarum, and obviously I am Wendell Mitchell Snow, and I think when you type it in on Amazon, you have to Google or you have to type in Wendell Mitchell Snow, because if you just type in Regnum Stellarum, it says that there's nothing there.
Okay.
But then if you type in Wendell Mitchell Snow, it will bring it up, and it's $5. Okay. So if anyone's interested, the plot is that a wormhole brings people from our timeline into another timeline in which Muslims and Templars are still fighting it out in between planets, and it's an interstellar kind of crusade feel to it. So if that interests people,
and it's quite good.
Mm-hmm.
I really like it.
Oh, well, thank you. And then if you want to connect with my NaNoWrimo, if you want to be my writing buddy on NaNoWrimo, my username is Wendell Mitchell Snow, all lowercase, and I would welcome any new writer friends to just be part of the community with me. That's great.
Okay, and Tony, what about you? Are you what's your username on NaNoWrimo?
My username is I am the Beard.
Okay,
and he is the Beard.
And
yes.
he is
his
the
beard is magnificent.
It's down to his waist.
Yes, I always, when most people meet me, they only remember me as the Beard, so it makes a good username. I am the Beard, and I'd love to get a message from some people.
Great, and obviously, you can also, as always, get in touch with us through Twitter with the hashtag FictionHack, and check out our website fiction-hack.com, where we'll put some show notes up. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, absolutely.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
A sink-a-dink-a-rink-a-dink, a sink-a-dink-a-doo. I love you. Sorry.